That's why they call it a jackhammer, because it's really in it. It's like...
Welcome everyone to another exciting episode of the Average Ontario Anglers Fishing Podcast. I'm your host today, Andrew, and as usual with the co-host riding shotgun in the seat of fishing is Jesse.
I sat on a hook.
First tip of the day, folks. Good tackle storage is a must. But we're gonna have a cool episode. This is kind of like a review episode, but that's all I'm gonna say for now. Review on what? Maybe it was, the last book report you did in high school. You got an F. What can I say? Spoiler alert. But we're going to have a good review about some of the things that happened this past year. But first, and potentially foremost, we'll see how the rest of the episode goes, Jesse's going to start us off with an interesting fishing fact. This has the potential to be the highlight of the episode, Jesse, so I'm expecting big things.
Well, I'm actually going to need Andrew's help with this one, because this one is a very daunting topic. Now, this isn't per se an interesting fishing fact, because this is something that won't interest you. This is something that'll make you very sad. Now, Andrew, do you know what sad is pertaining to this time of year?
Water's closing up. It's freezing. It's cold.
All those things are bad. We like to call this seasonal affective disorder. Sad. And all these things that Andrew's talking about are some of the reasons that you may be sad. So I was thinking, I was done work the other day, and I got out, and it was like 4:30 and it was pitch dark outside, and that made me sad. And I was just like, it's that time of year. It's just catching up with us. The time change just happened, and it gets so dark so early. Even on the weekends, we were fishing the other day, and it was like we had to stop fishing at like 4:30 because it was dark out. Mm-hmm. It's such a sad, depressing time of the year. Not only that, it's getting cold, which also makes me sad. If you're an ice angler, this may make you happy. But in general, it's cold. And 3, most of the fishing seasons are pretty much almost done until ice fishing season. So you always have that weird gap where it's like fall fishing is done or really difficult or uncomfortable, and there's not ice yet. So you have this kind of like a limbo period of stupidity that is very sad. It makes you sad. So I thought we could kind of cover a few things that you can do so that you won't be so sad. Now, I looked up an article and they gave some pretty good things you could do, but I want to try to do some that are more fishing oriented, because the actual original list was pretty lame. But let's go through it quick and see what Andrew may think about this. So one of the top 10 things you should do so that you're not sad during this time of year is go outside, but during the daylight hours. Makes sense. I try to do that at work sometimes because I pretty much work in like a weird building without windows. So sometimes I'll go outside and be like, it's been raining for hours? I don't know. Try to go outside, get some sun. That's good. Another thing they say is use light therapy. You ever seen those like light therapy boxes people sit in front of, and it gives you like the nice like UV light, and you're like, yes, the sun. It's not the sun. It's a box. Lame. Next one, stay active. I've been trying to go to the gym again. That also makes me sad. So I'm not going to go with that one. I don't like that. Focus on nutrition. I'm not even going into that one. That is very sad. Not interested. Things that make me happy is not like eating fruit. That's not happy. This is a good one. Start a hobby. Now, if fishing is your hobby, this is a bad time to start it because, like I said, it's that weird limbo time. So, let's not do that. Get enough sleep. That's not a problem, is it, Andrew, this time of year? Because what do you do when it's dark and there's nothing else to do?
You go to sleep.
You sleep.
I'm tired as soon as it gets dark. My brain is not for the time of day. It's for the light that's outside. And I just decide it feels like it's 11 o'clock. I'm going to bed without looking at the clock. And it's really like 5:30.
Yesterday, me and my wife were watching a movie. I had like dinner and a movie. And when the movie ended, it was like 6:30. And I was like, is it like 9 p.m.? It was like, no, it's 6:30. I was like, no, I have to stay up to go to bed now. So that list was pretty lame. So I thought we could cover the fishing list. So this is the list that I've come up with of things that you can do during this sad time of year to make you more happy.
I thought that was the funny list, and I was like, Jesse should have tried harder. This is shaping up to be a bad episode.
All right, so we've done I'm pretty sure me and Andrew have pretty much done almost every one of these. So I'm sure you guys listening can pick one or two of these that you can do to make your fall season, or if you don't ice fish, your whole winter season, a little more manageable. So number one is plan your next fishing trip. That's one thing me and Andrew do. Andrew will always tell you, when do we start planning our next fishing trip?
While we're on the current one.
Yes. We'll be fishing and be like, you know what we should do next weekend? It's always fun. Like me and Andrew, really at the end of the year, again, we have this podcast. So generally, 1 or 2 times a year, we have like a podcast meeting where we'll kind of like schedule out the podcast and be like, this is what we want to do, blah, blah, blah. At the same time, we always get sidetracked and we start planning our fishing trips, usually because a lot of them are camping trips that we have to plan, 6 months ahead of time. But we've already started that. Me and Andrew literally have almost all of next year already planned and where we're going to fish. It's pretty exciting. We're not going to tell you because then you might plan the same things. We might bump into you on the lake. Not interested in that. But planning your favorite fishing trip.
That makes me
What
sad.
can you do? Yeah. What are some things you can do to plan your next fishing trip? Well, you can do a lot of research. The internet is a gold mine for finding spots to go fishing. Like last week, we talked about our trip to Lake St. Clair. Does that interest you? You're probably nodding your head because the opportunity to catch a giant muskie like the one Andrew caught, that should interest everyone. So finding spots like that, pretty easy to find online. You can also like talk to people on social media. You can go into forums, all kinds of things to help you find fishing spots. And that itself is exciting. Like I know my wife does this when she plans vacation. She likes planning all the little things like, oh, we're going to go here. We're going to eat here. We're going to do this. That's lame. I hate that. But when it comes to fishing, I love it. Just like, is there a tackle shop nearby? Yes. Okay. Mm-hmm. I'm interested. The second thing we can do, I find that whenever I do this particular thing, I lose track of time and time just flies by. And my wife will be like, are you coming to bed? And I'm like, and there's tackle all over the floor. Organize your tackle box. Now, if you don't have one box, most of us have multiple trays and stuff. Organizing your tackle, like that could take realistically weeks. Yeah. I know Andrew, it should take him weeks.
I organize things multiple times because I'll do it and I'm like, I should organize it again and make sure. And I'll think of a better way. It's like, instead of putting all my crankbaits together, I'll put all my baits that dive certain depths together. And then it's like, but instead of doing that, I'll organize them by size and I organize them again.
I have a big shoebox. It's not even a shoebox. It's for work boots. And it's full of
that's called
when you get home from a trip. Well, it's a work boot box. It's a big box. And every time I have just like a lure that needs a hook replaced or something, I just throw it in that box, unless it's like something that I use regularly. So I have this huge box just full of random stuff in it. And I'm always like, one day I'm going to go through that, and I never do. So maybe that's what I'm going to do. And that will make me happy because every time I'm podcasting, I'm looking over there at that box over there. I can see it right now. I can just picture it, rattling and jiggling in my hand, just like, shh, put new hooks on me, Jesse. I'm like, okay. Catch a fish. And yet, what do we do instead of organizing our tackle? We buy more tackle. The vicious cycle continues. It's terrible. Another thing you can do, and this may sound weird, but you can learn a new fishing technique. And now you may not learn the actual mechanics of actually doing it, but you can learn all the information of like mentally of how to do it and prepare for it. So one thing that, like a lot of people have been interested in, for instance, is fly fishing. We don't really talk a lot about fly fishing because we don't really fly fish a lot. We used to. Maybe we should do that next year, Andrew. We should fly fish. But that is one thing that if you want to sit down and read a bunch of information on, 100% winter's the time to do it. And you'll be ready to go for trout season in the spring. Definitely. This one is dangerous. Step 4, very dangerous. Use this with caution. I know a few guys that did this and now they're doomed. Absolutely doomed. Experiment with lure crafting. Trying to make your own lures or starting your own bait, like, your bait company. And just like some guys start out and they're like, you know what? I'm going to buy a few molds. I'll get some plastic. I'll make a few baits. The next thing you know, their name's West from Wham Baits and they have like a huge selection of baits to choose from. It's dangerous. That's a slippery slope right there. I don't know. I personally, I've thought about doing it, but I see how Wes spends his nights. Like, I'm not like creepily watching him, but like he tells me he's just making baits all night. Terrible.
But Jesse had to say that as a disclaimer, but he definitely watches Wes at night.
I wish. Another thing you can do, and this is something that me and Andrew do occasionally. This sounds kind of cheesy, but reflect on your best catches. Now, again, me and Andrew have a podcast. We talk about our best catches all the time, which is not that many. We don't catch very many good fish. But oftentimes me and Andrew will just get together. Again, we see each other all the time, but we'll get together, we'll have a coffee, beer, whatever, and we'll just reminisce about, the good old days. Generally, we do that a lot when we're fishing, but we do we do that a lot in the winter as well. Usually when we're planning our fishing trips. So that's another thing you can do. Another good person to do that with is your grandpa or your grandma. They love hearing stories like that. So my grandpa does, at least. And then 5 minutes later, he'll forget I told him, and I'll just tell him the exact same story. That is also sad. It's only funny because it's my grandpa and he's hilarious. Anyway, one thing that you can definitely do this time of year is prep for ice fishing. If you ice fish, you're probably already raring to go. For me personally, we're still muskie fishing at this time. I think I have one more trip left, but we go pretty late into the season this year. I haven't even looked at my ice fishing stuff. Like, have you, Andrew?
I have not picked it up. No.
Yeah. Like right above me, these shelves on top of it, I have like 6 or 7 ice fishing rods just jiggling up there. I got one right here. You can hear that. That's the ice fishing noise. I was just saying to Andrew, I'm like, I bought this rod last year and I didn't even use it. It doesn't even have a reel or anything on it. I need to go through and put new line in all my ice reels, make sure they're up to snuff, and get all my baits together. Because sometimes throughout the year, I kind of steal baits from my ice fishing box. I'm like, I'm going jigging for smallies. So I grab all like the blade baits out of my ice fishing box. And then when I go ice fishing, I'm like, where's all my baits? I got to organize all that stuff, man. Another thing you can do is make sure you do your maintenance on your reels. Now, I've had some people ask about this. I actually had a question from one of our followers, and he asked if we do our own maintenance or what we do at the end of the year with our reels. I'm not a huge in-depth reel taker aparter because I'm afraid that, a spring's going to shoot out and I won't know where it goes or anything like that. But when it comes to bait casting reels myself, I do all the maintenance myself unless something crazy happens. Take it apart, do some basic oiling and greasing. We actually have an episode on fishing reel maintenance. I'm going to link that down below in the show notes if you want to listen to that. We're not going to get in depth, but that is a good time to go through. It depends how many rods and reels you have, but it could take you a long time to actually like get everything, clean, take apart your reel. Like if you take a good amount of time to do it correctly, taking apart a reel and greasing everything, it could take you a few hours to do a bunch of reels. So that's another thing you can do. So all these things, all these tips will help you be less sad. And I guarantee if you are someone that is passionate about angling, you could probably do every single one of those things, every single one, but you should at least pick 3. And then once you do the third one, do another one, and then do another one until you do all 9 of them. But anyway, that's my interesting fishing fact. Because you know what? I was pretty sad the other day when it was dark out. Now I've just reminded myself that I just have a lot of like work to do this winter. That's pretty sad.
Yeah. I need to find my ice fishing boxes again, because I think I've at least 2 years in a row now, I've misplaced my last box. And then I end up buying a bunch of new tackle and new like jigs and stuff like that, put in a new small tackle tray. And then a week later, I find my box right, after the trip, whatever. I'm like, now I have 2 ice fishing boxes. And yet I still lose all of the ones that I have every year.
I honestly think that tackle companies make tackle boxes out of material that randomly becomes invisible. That has to be the case, because sometimes I'll be like, oh, I had a box full of this here. I'll look everywhere. And like, you see, I have shelves behind me. That's where all my fishing stuff is. It's not like it could be anywhere else in my house. It's usually there. But sometimes I look and it's not there. And then when I come back from a fishing trip from the tackle shop, it's there right in front of my face. I don't know if I'm just going blind or what, but I don't know. Maybe that stuff, it's got like some weird alien technology, like camouflage, just like just disappears. As soon as you see you brought some baits in, comes back. I don't know.
That's the most plausible thing you've said thus far, Jesse. I appreciate your input. Moving on to our standard topic now. Not standard topic. It's not a standard topic. Moving on to our main topic. That's the word I'm looking for. We're going to talk about our top fishing lures of the past year. Like I said, it's kind of a in review kind of episode, but we're going to be focusing on just the lures and perhaps through the seasons and whatnot of what has been our favorite, what has produced well for both Jesse and I. And maybe, just maybe, this will give you something to do during this sad season coming up that we're experiencing, because you'll be like, now I have something to save up for and buy myself. So if you already own these lures, congratulations. We're not spending any more of your money. If you don't, we don't lawfully encourage you to go do it, but we know that you will, and that's okay. I'm going to start the first one because in the spring we had an awesome spring. We talked about it before. We had the best bass fishing day. We went out with Brad Scott, Canadian Cowboy Outdoors, and we went for some pre-spawn bass in Zone 20. How many fish did we catch that day? We fished for what, 6 hours?
Yeah. It was a lot.
we need to be, can't be prideful. We're not going to tell you the real number.
And just to mention, the fishing that particular day we went out, the weather was perfect. Like everything was perfect. And we were fishing with someone who was very knowledgeable. So I did do another trip myself. I caught a lot of fish. It wasn't that much, but it was a great day. That day was fantastic.
Yeah. That was a crazy day, a crazy way to start the year, to catch, more bass than I had caught the entire 3 years previous combined.
Yeah.
In one single day. Like that was nuts. But this was one of the best producing baits. And it's the Chatterbait Evo. What I love about this is, yes, it's got the chatterbait. It's a bladed jig. We love it. If you've listened to pretty much any episode we've ever had on this show before, you know that we love the chatterbait, especially me. The Chatterbait Evo is really nice because it has a wire-tied skirt, but the most important part for me is the bait keeper that's on these. And this is a Z-Man plastic. It's not glued, and that thing does not come off. It's not sliding down that hook shank as I yank on the tail of this thing, of the chatter spike. And that was super nice to be catching bass after bass after bass after bass on these things and not have to constantly reset that ball of Z-Man plastic on the back of that thing or change my trailer because it's ripped in half. So I used the same trailer and same chatterbait all day. And I didn't have to readjust. It was amazing. I've never experienced that before especially with Z-Man plastic, of not having to reset the plastic after like every single fish. It just was there. It's perfect. Ready to go, right nice and neat on that hook shank. And that's with that new bait keeper design that they have on the Chatterbait Evo. But that's hands down, that has got to be one of my favorite baits. And I use it all year round. So yes, it produced really well in the spring. Guess what happened when it turned summer? It produced really well. Turned into fall. It still produced really well.
It's hard to beat a chatterbait.
Yeah, these things is one of my go-to baits. It's always on. And especially now, the Evo I love just because I'm not fiddling with it as much as previous models. And the Chatter Spike as well is one of my favorite trailers is my favorite trailer for the chatterbait as well. Because I like something slender that the vibration of the blade moves the tail for you. I don't want anything to kind of have its own pull and prevent that or mitigate any of the vibration.
Yeah, it hunts very well. So if you have a bait with like a paddle tail, and again, a lot of pros do that, but I've also heard a lot of pros like Brett Height, who's like the father of the chatterbait. Like he's so successful with it at the beginning. And he just like wants a straight bait on the back that doesn't impede the hunting action of a chatterbait, because the chatterbait will like go going straight and then it kicks to the side and it kicks the other side. It just has this random erratic darting. And that new Evo, it's amazing. The thing is with the Evo, just as a quick comparison. So everyone's heard of the jackhammer. This is the evergreen jackhammer, which is like a high-end chatterbait. These are like what, $25 to $30 in Canada?
Yeah. I usually see them for
cheap.
like 27 bucks.
Yeah. I have a few of them. I ordered a bunch of reels from Japan and they usually send you a gift. So I got a bunch from that. I picked up a few over the years just to test. Are they worth the $29? To me, they're not, because the Evo, side by side, you look at these and the untrained eye, you're like, they're the exact same thing. And that just goes to show you how good the Evo is. It's not exactly as good as a jackhammer, but it's dang close. It's 95% as good, in my opinion. The only problem that we had is the clip on it did open up on Andrew. Again, he caught like 50 fish on it. So, I mean, like it's going to happen, but the clip I don't trust at this point, but replacing the clip is still worth spending $15 on a chatterbait over, almost 30. So, and true, like Andrew said, I put this is the original one from spring.
Yeah.
And it still has the plastic on it. And I caught tons of fish on it. Great baits. They have such a good erratic action and the blade starts immediately. There's no split ring between the blade. Another thing that I just remember, Andrew, I didn't tell you, is I'm pretty sure I was reading that the patent for Z-Man for the blade attaching directly to the head, that patent expired this year or this coming year. So you're going to be seeing a lot more brands coming out with the direct connection. So I know a lot of brands would have to put a split ring between the blade and the head. And generally speaking, that destroys the action completely of any chatterbait, because the whole point of the chatterbait is it makes so much noise is because the blade's smacking in the side of the head as it wobbles, right? That's why they call it a jackhammer, because it's really in it. It's like, So that patent is, it's coming up. So if you're not a fan of Z-Man, which I don't know why you wouldn't, because they're awesome. A lot of other brands are going to have some pretty sick chatterbaits coming out in 2025. So definitely keep that in mind as well. So yeah, they're great baits.
Yeah. And another thing too, the reason why I think it attaching to the head directly is so important is for the chatterbait to work effectively, the blade has to have limited movement. If it's allowed too much freedom, the blade can start moving around and it's not going to actually start to chatter right away. Whereas if it's right on the jig head, it only has a limited range of motion from side to side. So when you start pulling on it, it can only go that far and then it has to pull back the other way. So that's why they start up so nice and easy when they are, if you think, oh, the chatterbait brand is so good, it's because, yes, they are for one. But two, it's because it has that direct eye contact. That is why it starts up so much better than many other versions that have a split ring in the middle. It's just another thing that gives the blade a bit more freedom and therefore doesn't allow it to kind of work its magic.
Thought I could go kind of back in time with the next one, because Andrew's like, that was our first trip of the year. That was our first trip in a boat for bass, but we actually had been out fishing many times before that. That was in like early May, something like that. One bait that we recommended a lot in the spring, and I'm going to recommend it again because this is now my new favorite jerk bait. I even convinced Andrew to buy a bunch of them, which that's usually pretty hard to do because he's, he doesn't buy any lures ever. Just kidding. It was pretty easy. Jerk bait. We had a fantastic spring, caught a bunch of really good pike in the spring. I actually caught my PB on this particular bait. This is the Duo Realis. This is the 120 SP. So it's 120 millimeters, slightly bigger than a general 110 size jerkbait, which is kind of the standard, like the Vision 110 or most, Rapala jerkbaits. They have like a 110 size. It's kind of a standard size. Speaking of 110, this is the Duo Realis 110 SP. So there's a bunch of different sizes. There's also one bigger than this. They come in all different kinds of sizes. Duo Realis, we did a whole podcast, Interesting Fishing Fact, about how they create their baits, and they're made in Japan. They have such a high standard for production. The quality of their baits it's insane. It's super, super good. And the action of these baits is phenomenal. They cast like a rocket. They have like a weight transfer system. They come with sticky sharp hooks. The patterns are insane. Like this is a Fire Tiger. This is like bright. Like you're looking at this thing with sunglasses on. It's so bright. It casts like a mile, like I said. And when you rip these back, they have a really erratic darting action. They suspend really well. And the other thing is, unlike some jerk baits, when you reel these in, if you just want to straight retrieve them in like a crankbait, they actually have like a nice wobble. Some jerk baits, they're designed to be jerk baits. And when you reel them in, they don't have much action. They kind of just have like a thin, little shimmy to them. This actually has a nice retrieved action as well. So overall, I caught two really nice pike this spring, almost at the 40-inch mark too. I think that big one, it was 37 and a half inch. I was like, oh, so close, but it was a nice big pike on this baby. So I also caught a bunch of bass on them as well, mostly on the 110 size, but that is a great bait. If you're looking to up your jerk bait game, if you're normally using like Husky jerks or something like that, like from Rapala, and you're like, I like jerk baits, I just don't cast very far, treat yourself to a nice Japanese jerk bait. You don't have to go up and buy like a $35 megabass. These are like $21. It's a little more expensive than buying a Rapala, but not by much. With the prices of Rapalas going up, these are not that much more. And in my opinion, they're much better, in my opinion. So definitely check them out. We've had a few guys that bought them on our recommendation in the spring. They absolutely love them. So I don't think I'm crazy. I think just they're great baits.
And as someone who, we always say like my favorite jerk bait for pike has been for years, the X-Rap. And I love the X-Rap. But I think the next few I'm going to buy are going to be more the Duo Realis. And that's because for the price point, you're getting something where in the end is cheaper, because on the X-Raps, I like to change out the hooks just to be a bit sharper, a bit more higher quality. And if that's something you're planning to do, again, I've used the X-Rap hooks right out of the box and I've caught fish in them. Don't get me wrong. But Jesse and I have both, and especially Jesse, we've been really focused on making sure that our terminal tackle is giving us the best possible advantage for us. And we've noticed a difference. And so being able to, if I'm going to swap out the hooks in a bait, may as well go for a bait that already has those quality hooks. Maybe it costs me $1.50 more or a couple bucks more. It cost me, $10 for a pack of 6 good quality trebles. So that means I'm spending like, $3 or $5 on 3 different trebles, which means I upped the price of that $70 jerk bait up to, $23, $22. So I'm already at the point for a JDM that already has perhaps those quality hooks I'm looking for. And my next bait is actually also a jerk bait.
Ooh.
And this was this is something that I loved using in the spring. Even in the summer, I find the reason why I really like this is the Evergreen XV5. It's like your standard diving jerkbait suspending. It's got, I think it's rated to dive, 5 feet, I think it is. What I like these is the shape, the profile of these is completely different. And it looks more like, not quite, but almost like a crankbait body style. It's much thicker. It looks like a shad body. And this thing, I really like. It's got a wide lip, so you can use it on a straight retrieve like a crankbait with no issue. I've caught plenty of fish on it that way. And then when you want to give it some good twitches, like a jerkbait, this thing works really, really well. It has 3 treble hooks, which for the length of the bait is kind of surprising. There's 3 treble hooks on this thing. You could definitely, if you wanted, remove a couple of or remove the middle one and upsize the front and the rear, like we talked about in a previous interesting fishing fact. But I will say the hooks that come on this thing are some of the sharpest hooks I've ever seen come out of a box. I don't know exactly what they are, but they, like, to say they're needle sharp is a complete understatement. They somehow have like those exceptionally sharp burrs on the tip of every point. So I have the ultimate confidence when I cast this. I love this for pike. The hooks are a little bit light for pike, I would say, but smallies, they love this. And for smallmouth, I like something that's a bit thicker, maybe not as long, but has a bigger body. I find that just as a bit more natural silhouette. And I don't know if that's just, my confidence thing, but I have had really good success with that, the Evergreen XV5. So if you see these, they come in a couple different colors, but they have been killing it for, spring bass in the summer, even, anywhere, fishing up a rock pile, like a shoal or something like that. These things are absolutely awesome. I love these. And I've unfortunately lost a couple to pike when I was bass fishing. So
yeah, it's a very unique bait because it's like, like Andrew said, it's like a shad style crankbait, but it's a jerk bait.
Yeah.
So like most of the time jerk baits are long and thin. This is like short and fat. So, it depends where you fish. Like say you fish in a lake that the dominant forage is like bluegills. This pattern is going to match up. They have a bunch of really good bluegill colors too. And it's just like, it's a short, fat little bluegill swimming along, twitching around, boom, delicious.
Yeah.
But,
and I've used some crankbaits that, like, it looks like crankbaits, but it's called a jerkbait. And I've tried to use it as a jerkbait, and it just doesn't have like any real darting action. You try and jerk it, it just kind of pulls forward in the water again, pulls forward. This one is a really good balance where it's not the same as, like a Vision 110 or the Duo Realis or an X-Wrap, where, it's not going to like glide and shoot forward because it's super slender with a tiny lip. Like, no, there's a fair sized lip on that, but it does still like hunch and like rip off to the side, which I really, really want from a jerkbait. So I find that's a really good middle ground of being able to do like a really good straight retrieve and also work, pause over a spot and like really work it slow if you suspect that there's something following or whatnot.
And it's unique. It's not something like when I first saw it in the package, I was like, oh, that's cool. I haven't seen anything like that. So it's definitely a cool bait. The next one, I thought we could kind of shoot into a lure that we got spanked on when we were fishing with Brian. But it's a bait that we use a lot anyway for other trips. But I thought we could talk about our fishing trip, just like the walleye trips this spring. We did really good on just like small 2.5 to 3 inch swim baits, little tiny swim baits on little tiny jig heads, like an 1/8, 3/16 little jig heads. I was using a bunch of different ones. I was using this Mega Bass, the one with the little blade on the back, the jig head, and the little Hazadong shad, I think it is. The little baby one, I think it's like 2 3/4 inches long, just a little cute little guy. Caught a lot of bass on that this year, smallies, bunch of largemouth, but mostly smallies, but a lot of walleye too. And another bait, a local one that we caught fish on too. We have the Jacked Up Jigs swim bait head, which has been really good. I actually really like the hook on this one. It's a little bit longer, which I like, but it's super sharp. But I got on this a Wham Baits Swimpleton, which is like, it's a 3 and I forget the exact length, but it's like 3 inches ish. And I got a bunch of colors at CanCast. I got, green pumpkin, which is, you can't beat that, but I also got a bunch of white ones. We did end up catching a lot of smallmouth on that as well, a few walleye. But the one that I don't know what it was. And I think it was just like my confidence, but I picked up a pack of these Savage Gear Fat Minnow T-tails at Ganyan Sports. It's a little 3-inch bait. Never seen these before. And they're just like a cute little paddle tail, ultra realistic, has fins coming out of it, has like little cute little eyes in it. At least the fish thought it was cute. And I put these on just a little 1/8 ounce jig head. This one is a mega bass like jig head. I like to have a sharp hook. But you can see this one, it's completely chotched. I caught so many fish on this. This particular color, it just, sometimes you just see a color and you're like, I need that. That is the best. I can't even read the color because it's like in Swedish. Like I have no idea. But it's like green pumpkin shad with like a fluorescent orange tail. I like the contrasty tail. Like if there's ever like just a natural color with that bright tail, and you see this thing just swimming down there at the bottom, you can see it a mile away, and the fish were just keying in on it. We went on this trip with paddleheads. We were walleye fishing and we caught tons of fish on this bait. And I don't know if it was just my confidence, but this particular bait absolutely smashed them. And like Savage Gear, for me, it's a company that's really growing on me. They just seem to be releasing all these sick baits all the time. And it's like stuff that you're like, that looks sick. I want to fish that. That was really good. But in general, little 3-inch paddle tails, I feel like any lake you fish, anywhere, walleye, bass, anything, even pike, you're going to catch fish on baits this big, especially early in the season, because that's the size of the bait fish in the lake. They're still small. And the fish it's like a little snack to them. They just come up and inhale it and swim away. It's crazy. You'll be reeling in all of a sudden. It's like, this is fish on. There's no like biting. It just inhales the thing. It's crazy. So that was a great bait.
Absolutely. One of the things that I loved, I have a couple others I'm going to talk about that are topwater baits. I love topwater. I'm not alone in saying that. I know Jesse likes topwater. I know most of our listeners who ever do like bass fishing especially are going to tell you their favorite way to catch a bass is on topwater. But one of the ones that I've used for a couple of years now, this is the Z-Man Hellraiser. I just realized that the last 3 baits I've shown are Z-Man. Or no, I've shown the Daiwa. Anyways, this is the Hellraiser. And it's one of those baits that I looked at it, I thought, that looks gimmicky. Like a chatterbait. That looks gimmicky when it first came out, right? Is it? Yes, absolutely it is. Does it work? Absolutely it does. This thing slays. I was using it, actually the larger size, using the 5-inch size. When we were doing that pre-spawn trip, I was catching them in May.
It was May, early May.
Early May. I was catching them on a Hellraiser on topwater. Now again, that's a completely different time than, perhaps I'd say, late June or whatever you have open for your bass, whatever zone you're in. But into the summer, I really, really like the Hellraiser for a couple reasons. One, it's topwater, so you get those awesome blow-ups. The 4-inch model has been fantastic for smallmouth. But the weight of it, this thing weighs, I think this one is 5/8 or maybe was it 7/16? Something like that. Anyway, just over a half ounce, I think. That'd be 9/16. Maths. But this thing here, I've on the larger one, I even put like musky grade hooks on it, like lighter side, but musky hooks on it, and I was catching musky on these things. This 4-inch one I was using at the cottage this year, and I was slamming smallmouth on the top water with this. The reason why I love it is because the casting accuracy with this thing for a topwater bait is top notch, especially like it's considered a walk the dog style, but it's just straight retrieve. That's all you have to do with this thing. But because it's back weighted, this huge weight and blade on the back end, when you fire this out, there's no like weight transfer. It just flies straight back. But first, all the way exactly where you're casting, it loads the rod up really, really, really well. And then you just got to be really quick to start retrieve immediately because this thing starts to sink. And I mean quick. Like it sinks pretty quick because, again, it's a lot of weight. It does not float. But because of the line tie being almost halfway down the body, when you start reeling this in, it starts chattering back and forth. And it just needs a nice bubble trail in the water. And anything from pike works really well on these too. The hookup ratio for a topwater bite on pike is awesome on these things. Smallmouth, they inhale it. I'm just a huge fan of these. It's one of my go-to topwaters now just because it's so easy to work, especially if you're fishing from small crafts or you're fishing from shore and it's difficult to work your rod. Sometimes I'll be in like the back of the boat or depending on the shoreline, it's awkward for me to start trying to walk the dog just with how I'm positioned in the boat. I don't want to start, hitting Jesse in the back of the head with every time I'm trying to get it to knock to the side. Sometimes I do that unapologetically, but I try not to now. And this thing has been fantastic because you get that awesome topwater action you're kind of looking for, but with little to no effort.
It's a great like idiot bait. Like if you're having one of those days
like
when
the
you don't really
chatterbait
want to think about it, just chuck it out, reel it in, it catches fish.
Yeah. It's essentially more than they call it a walk the dog, but bait. It's a topwater chatterbait. That's what that thing is.
Oh, it's from Z-Man. Of course it is, right? Yeah. And I've seen Andrew crush tons of fish. Big muskie, smallmouth, Everything eats that thing. It's one of those baits that's like, you check it out, you don't know what's going to hit it. You never know. Anything's going to eat it. So that was a great bait. One category I thought we could cover is just jigs, weedless jigs, because I thought I could cover them all because I have 5 here, but they all kind of did the same thing. I just like a bunch of different ones I was using, starting in early season bass, going all the way through bass season. For early season bass, I bought this one jig. So I was actually in the States last year, and in the States, the bass fishing selection at even like the most basic fishing stores, it's insane. So like I was seeing all these, I love swim jigs, huge swim jig fan for largemouth. I'm seeing all these swim jigs that I could not find in Canada at all. So you can find them now, but I was using this as the 6 Sense Divine swim jig. This is one of the best looking swim jigs I've ever seen. It's just amazing. I see the hook's like bent out on this because I caught so many fish on it. Just try to bend that back. But this is like a bluegill color.
That hook point's almost like 30 degrees up.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I caught probably 30 bass on this year, this particular one. And then I retired it because the hook point is like completely rolled up and the hook's bent. But I have on this is a 1/4 ounce swim jig. I was fishing a bit shallower, so I bought a bit of a lighter one. And this is an X-Zone Swammer, which is one of my favorite swim baits. It has a really nice paddle and roll to it. This particular one, I like it because it has a very big hook and it has a flat head on the bottom, which I don't know if it helps more than I think it does, but I feel like it helps it like plane better when you're reeling it in, so it doesn't just sink down. This was a great bait. Early season bass, regular season bass, doesn't matter. The thing is with a chatterbait, they're great baits. Like Andrew said, you just cast them and reel them in. If you want to have even less thinking involved, just tie in a swim jig. It doesn't have that big blade on the front, but you literally can cast this anywhere because it has actually like a weed guard on it. Chatterbaits are not weedless. You can rip them through the weeds, but swim jigs, you can cast them directly into reeds, into lily pads, through thin weed, like clumps of weeds, and reel it and pull it through and rip it through all that stuff. And that's where all the big bass are, and they'll come out and grab it. I had a great day where I was literally just chucking them into reeds and reeling it through. Another great thing with a swim jig is you don't have to swim it. I think people are like, oh, it's a swim jig, you have to swim it. If you're swimming a swim jig around and then you get to like a nice like hole beside a dock or a log, just pitch it in there. Pretend it's a regular jig and just flip it. Like you don't have to swim it. You can fish it other ways. So that was a great jig. Another one that I was fooling around with too, and Andrew saw how sick this one looked. This is actually a Jacked Up Jigs swim jig. And I have on the back of this a Wham Baits Whamphibian. So it's a frog style bait, but it has a really flat, wide bottom. Now the thing that this particular setup is super good at is like, I call it floating. I don't know if that's even a thing, but I kind of like chuck it out. And since it's got such a flat bottom and a lot of lift from these twister tails, you can kind of just reel it slow and it kind of floats up near the surface. Like it's kind of just like, it doesn't sink that much because it's such a flat bottom. And I kind of like float it through the spots like juicily, like, hey, look at this, delicious.
Juicily.
Juicily is a word, people. Anyway, so that was a great one. I've glued this one up a few times because these Wham Baits Whamphibians, like they got a really unique, cool action that I was pretty impressed with. So definitely check those out. And then just for regular swim jigs, I started using this year the Berkeley swim jigs. They're like $5.50, $6. I was actually really impressed. They've got a really good stout hook on it. A lot of great colors. Again, we try to buy local as much as we can, but I do like to try other brands. The Berkeley swim jigs and jigs in general, really good. Highly recommended. And then for my regular pitching, this year I did really good with these particular colors. These are both my favorite jig of all time. This is the Perfect Jig tungsten jig. These are both 3/8, which I like in shallowish water. On the back of this, I have a Z-Man Helicraws, which is a crawbait. And on the back of this one, I have an X-Zone Muscleback Craw, which is like just a flappy craw. I was using both of these in early season. This is black and blue. Can't beat that. This is kind of I think an Okeechobee color. It's kind of like green pumpkin and blue. Both good. Andrew and me, I like fishing jigs and he likes chucking chatterbait. So it's kind of a good combination as we're going through because he'll be casting in the open areas and I'll be flipping behind him into the crap, so to say. So that makes for a good fishing team. Generally, he catches more fish when he's chucking a chatterbait, but usually I'll pull a bigger, fatter one out usually. So I'll catch one fat one and he'll catch like 30 normal size ones. So I don't know if it's worth it, but
it depends on what tournament rules are fishing that day, you know.
All right, what's your next bait?
The next
Let me guess, Z-Man?
For those audio listeners, he was absolutely right. Now, This one is my favorite. There are a variety of companies that have soft plastic frogs for topwater purposes, like the amphibian. It works well. The goat toad here from Z-Man is a little bit like this one was designed from the ground up to be a topwater frog. That's what it was designed for. They had the goat toad, sorry, not the goat toad. They had the goat and the billy goat before, which are awesome trailers. You can use them as topwater as well with the right hook. But the goat toads themselves are designed for topwater fishing. Super stretchy, so I like these. Again, with Z-Man, I don't have to worry about them just getting sliced up or eaten up. On this one itself, I caught probably about 80 bass on it this year. Jesse's got one there, spinning it like a, I don't know, weird dancer.
They're stretchy.
It looks like those old rubber silly hands that like you'd slap things with, you know.
Yeah.
But these things, we've been putting them on. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jesse. I think is it the Berkeley hooks? Berkeley Fusion.
No, so these are the Mustad grip pin hooks.
Grip pin, that's it is.
Yeah,
the Mustad grip pin. Now, these things, they're really good. They have the hook keeper right on the top on a big ball with a hook keeper. So it held the head of these things really, really well until you caught, let's say 30 bass on it. Then it started to slip up a bit. But that's only because the Z-Man plastic, as resilient as it is starting to rip a little bit just around the hook head. Z-Man, I do want to try the new Z-Man hooks for it because they're designed to hold Z-Man plastic really, really well. But this thing is fantastic because with any topwater frog, this is completely Texas straight on these. You can cast it pretty much anywhere except like the thickest of reeds. And you just slowly just reel it in. And it has these little floppy paddle tails in the back, just kicking, and it leaves a small trail. It's kind of like a buzzbait, but more subtle. And as you just reel it in, you can pause these things. You just sit there. You can kind of walk the dog them a little bit. And then just like a nice, slow, steady retrieve, usually you can get awesome results on. And again, I like the Z-Man one just because it floats really well. It holds a 3/0 hook, perfect size, and it just has just enough action for those subtle days when you want to fish like a nice kind of calm topwater. But we fished these a lot on some back lakes, even on pressured lakes. With someone who's perhaps inexperienced or having a hard time with those hollow body frogs. These are awesome because I find Jesse, you can either confirm or deny this. But I found when bass grabbed this thing, they didn't let go. Like the old Berkeley, bass grab it and don't let go. It kind of felt like that, where sometimes with the hollow body frogs, they spit them out a lot quicker. These things, there were many times that Jess and I'd be like talking, and then we look back and like, where's my frog? And then it's like, oh, my line's over there, and just like reel in and there's a bass on. So I found that the hookup ratio on these was really good, and the bass would really hold on to them well. So if you are inexperienced with frogging, these are an amazing way to kind of get into it. That's easy and also extremely productive.
Yeah. And just an example of that, this particular one I'm holding, I've probably caught 30 bass on this year. And it's still like, I'll use it next year. I won't even take it off the hook.
Yeah.
It's still fine. I put a dab of super glue where it attaches up near the eye so it doesn't slide down, but they last forever. So an example of how easy these are to fish, because you're using a single hook, and we're using a 3/0 because you don't need a big hook for these. You can literally use this on a spinning rod if you have to.
Mm-hmm.
Not saying it's the best, but if you have a medium heavy spinning rod, that's fine. You can skip these super easy. So my dad, he's fished his whole life, but he's not a big lure guy. So we went out fishing, I think 2 years ago. He's the kind of guy that's like, oh, I didn't know those lures worked. Like, yeah, they work, right? Because like he'd use lures like jitterbugs, stuff like that, right? But I tied on one of these Z-Man goat toads on a 3/0 hook. I have a spinning rod set up for this exact occasion. It's a 7-foot heavy, and then I got a reel with 30-pound braid on it, straight braid to a 4,000 size spinning reel. And I was like, just cast it out, reel it in. That's it. Like, the guy knows how to fish. He's fished his whole life. But he's like, okay. So he's casting it right in the lily pads, right on top of the lily pads, and bass were blown up on it, and he caught some fish. So like, it's easy to use. If you have like a kid, a nephew, someone that doesn't know how to fish, give them this bait. I guarantee if they're hitting topwater, they'll hit it. And the cool thing with this bait is, like Andrew said, the fish hold on to it, but I find it's such a different bite than a hollow body bite. Mm-hmm. Hollow body is usually like explosion, boom, the fish attacks it. These are more like, oftentimes they kind of just slurp it off the surface. I don't know why, but oftentimes it'll be gurgling along and the fish will grab it. But if you just let it sit, they just come up and they kind of like, and your frog disappears. There's just like a little ripple where it was. Mm-hmm. It's not like a big explosion. That's what I found anyway. And then the ease of setting the hook, like we were using bait casters, like medium heavy bait casters and like 30, 40 pound braid. You literally just reel in, feel the fish, and then just pull back and the fish was hooked. It wasn't like those huge, over exaggerated bass fishing hook sets. If you did that, I actually, I did that the first day and I snapped a fish off on 30 or 40 pound braid because I set the hook too hard and I slack lined it and snapped the line. And after that, I was just reeling in and just pulling back almost every single fish. I think we had a day we fished a back lake. We caught about 60 or 70 bass. And I'd say like 75% of them caught them on that bait. And every single fish that we just reeled in on, it was hooked perfectly fine. So it's great. You don't have to jack them super hard with a double hooked hollow body frog. Absolutely fantastic. And I will say, of all the people that messaged us this year that bought goat toads this year and then message us pictures of fish they caught on them and they're like, dude, these are the best bait of all time. I'm like, yeah, I know. If you caught some sick fish on any of these baits, send us some pictures on Instagram. We'd love to see them. But we got tons of people message us about the goat toad. So that just goes to show you they are awesome baits. Awesome baits. And get white. White's the best.
White. Yeah,
I did get some black ones too. Black and white. Black.
I even have that kind of color shift when it's the green and like that purple undertone. And I think it's called The Deal. And that one was almost just as effective or maybe just as effective as the white. So I was fishing that one for a long time that day too. Yeah. But yeah, they work awesome. So yeah, that's the first thing. If I'm going topwater fishing with someone, I'm giving them that because I don't know their abilities oftentimes. And if they're asking me what to do, it means they usually have less experience than me, and I don't have a whole lot. So
I would say though that this bait, it's been at 3 years, quickly became a top 5 bait of all time for me in Ontario. If you're bass fishing, it's great for smallmouth. It's great for largemouth. It's a little small for pike and muskie, but you can catch them on it. But like for bass fishing in shallow cover, this is a top 5 bait for me. It's just one of those baits I tie on and I have absolute confidence that's going to work.
I'm curious to hear your answer to this question then. If you have to choose one and you cannot use the other for the rest of your life, the goat toads or a hollow body frog, your ultimate favorite hollow body frog, whatever it may be, or the goat toad, you have to choose one over the other for the rest of your life.
That's a hard question because I feel like
they both have their benefits.
Yeah. I challenge Z-Man to make one bigger than this. This to me is too small. This is like a finesse size, like the size that it is now. I would love to see one that's slightly bigger because these are kind of hard to cast in a bait caster. They're not as heavy as I'd like. If they had a slightly bigger size that was a little more girth to it and a bit bigger floppy legs, I would say definitely the goat toad. The only problem with the goat toad is it's not good in like ultra heavy cover because of the hook on the bottom. It just like rolls over in like slop. But for everything else, I would pick this. But if I'm fishing super heavy cover, I would definitely stick with a regular hollow body. But I guess if I had to pick, I'd probably say a goat toad, honestly, because the hookup ratio is amazing. Like frog fishing with a double hooked frog and slop, hookup ratio is usually crap for most people. But for the goat toad, I would say, honestly, on the trips we had this year, I'd say is at least 90%, 95% even. Yeah. I can't say the same for a regular frog.
No, I would say the same because, like you said, the hookup ratio on these is way better than a hollow body. And for me, the times when, yes, a hollow body frog, like I love the scum frog, launch frog, love it. The XS, even like the smaller size, love those frogs. And they're really good for fishing scum, those sloppy areas. But if I had to choose between the two, I'd probably go with goat toad because in those areas, if I want to fish them, I'll just start flipping. It's like, okay, can't get topwater back there, but I can get good topwater anywhere else in that lake.
Yeah. I guess it depends on the lake you're fishing.
That's our preference too.
Yeah. They're such good baits. I know we talk about them a lot, but if you haven't picked any up, it doesn't matter if you're a beginner or if you're a legit professional angler, they are flat out fish catchers. Like I hate when people are like, oh, I wouldn't use that stupid bait. Dude, if it catches fish, just go for it. Even if it's the dumbest thing ever. Like we use Ned rigs.
And cost wise, you can pick up a pack of those, which comes in a 4-pack, and a pack of like 4 good quality hooks for the same price as one hollow body frog. So if you're fishing a place that has like, you don't want to use a leader for or anything like that, and there's pike or muskie in there and you're going to get bit off potentially, these are a great option to have something that's way cheaper, less of a heartbreak if it gets bit off on you, than
Yeah.
losing hollow body frogs all the time.
No, they're great. They come in a 3-pack, and legit,
3-pack.
I bought a 1-pack of white, 1-pack of black. I still have all 3 blacks, and I have 2 whites left because I lost one to a pike. So like they do last, and like I said, this particular one I'm holding in my hand, I've got tons of fish on it. Like a 2-day trip of just using this one bait. All right, enough gushing about the goat tail. You guys know how much.
No more Z-Man, I promise.
I thought we could kind of go back to pike season in May. So we had a good day, and I was using a bait in a technique that I had not done before. So I was kind of happy about that. And that was fishing a tube jig. Most of the time you hear tube jig and you think smallmouth bass. That's what you think, right? Or if you're me, you think flipping for largemouth, like flipping, a tube jig with like a tungsten weight around logs or docks or something like that.
Or lake trout if you're an ice fisherman.
Yeah. I've never fished a tube jig for pike, which is a shame because, man, the day that I had, I was like, how have I not done this before? I'm so dumb. You ever do that? You're just like, why have I not done this? But it was a great day. So I ended up buying a pack of these clown colored, they're 5-inch tube jigs. These are big tube jigs. They're for pike. This is Waterwolf Lures Tubezilla, kind of like Godzilla, but a tube. It's pretty cool. I think it's funny that this is called the Tubezilla, but his
thanks for walking me through
tubes. You're welcome. Andrew's a bit slow. Sometimes I have to help him out. No, but these are called Tubezillas. And then Mike has like 15-inch tubes, which are giant. And they're just called like Magnum tubes. Tubezilla sounds like it should be giant. But anyway, these are 5-inch tubes. I picked up a pack. He also sells the hooks. This particular hook, his Tubezilla jig heads, they're giant hooks. I think it's a 7/0 hook. So it's a nice beefy hook. It's a nice hook that you could catch trophy lake trout, big pike, anything big. You don't have to worry about bending out. So what we were doing is we were fishing weed edges on a river system, slow moving river system. Andrew was fishing a chatterbait. Not much was going on. It was one of those bright, bluebird skies days. And I was like, dude, these pike are going to be deep, just buried in the weeds. So I tied on one of these tube jigs and I was just like letting it sink down. And then when it got to the bottom, as soon as it started going to the weeds, I'd rip it up. And I was using a 7'5" heavy power rod. It was like my flipping rod. And I was just kind of ripping it through. And all of a sudden you just see a pike just dart out and just inhale the thing. I caught one. I was like, oh, that's awesome. Like this one has so many teeth marks in it. And I'm like, that's awesome. I caught the fish, started drifting down a bit more, did the same thing. Boom, boom, boom. Boom. Another pike jumps out of the weeds and grabs it. I'm like, Andrew, this is awesome. You want one of these? And he's like, nah. After the third fish, he asked for one. So it's a pretty cool technique. It's a technique. It's purely the reaction bite, right? So you have this bait. Tube jigs kind of have this cool spiraling action. It's kind of random on the way down and they kind of just glide down. It just looks like a dying bait fish. And as the pike's looking at it, all of a sudden, when you rip it up, it shoots up, tries to get away, and the pike, it has to hit it. It has to just go up and grab it, just like a cat and a mouse, right? So that was a great bait. Again, I bought a bunch of them after I had success that one day. Of course, I bought a bunch of other sizes and colors. So I'm going to try it again next year. But the other cool thing, like Andrew said, you can use these same baits for lake trout fishing. So we're excited to try that this year. Mm-hmm. What other baits you got, Andrew?
Well, I got another one here. This is no surprise I was going to mention this one. This is the Shadzilla, the solid body from Waterwolf Lures. And the reason why I bring this up again is because this is the one that I caught my 50.5-inch muskie on. What can I say that we haven't said already? I won't spend too much time on it because, again, we've talked about this a fair bit in the past couple podcasts. But Mike at Waterwolf Lures, he had for years, and a crowd favorite is the Shadzilla, and it's a hollow body bait, big like boot tail style swim bait. And this year, he's released the solid body. So instead of just being dipped kind of like tube hollow body, it's fully formed solid plastic, or not solid rubber, I guess I'd say. And what that does is, as you're reeling it in, it has a lot more body roll than the previous soft body or hollow body ones did. Still like nice kicking action, but the head kind of rolls with it too. These things have been killing it this year. So big shout out to Mike again for this. You got me, a legendary fish, my PB muskie for many, 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 many years before I'm going to break that one, I'm sure. Another one I wanted to mention that I caught a couple muskie on this year as well was the Ratzilla Junior. It was a 10-inch Ratzilla bait, kind of like a bulldog style, but I just like the fall rate of it a bit better. It has a kind of more glide. The tail, the ribbon tail, I find gets fouled less than the bulldog did. But again, that one I've had really good success with this year as well. So huge shout out to Waterwolf Lures. Thanks again, Mike, for making awesome baits.
We do enjoy, looking through all of Mike's stuff because he makes just stuff that it catches giant fish. Like, again, it's called Waterwolf Lures. It's big predatory fish lures, right? It's big jigs, big tube jigs, big swim baits. But if you're looking to catch some giant fish next season, definitely check out Mike's stuff. And again, Mike and Mary make all this stuff in Ontario. I've been to his workshop. It's insane. You walk in, it's just smells like plastic, but all these baits everywhere, just like crates full of hooks. It's pretty sweet. And again, another bait that we always talk about, the Shadzilla Junior. It's a baby version of the one Andrew's just talking about, but that's a great bait for pike, muskie, big walleye, big bass, catches big fish. I thought that I would talk about one more bait that we did pretty good on early season was spinner baits. I know we're always talking about chatterbaits. You think we're crazy. But guess what? I predicted this because I am a prophet of fishing. Just kidding. But I think spinner baits they're coming back. I know a lot of old people are like, they're never gone out of style. I've been using them since 1972. Like, yeah. But like baits go in and out of popularity. So I honestly think that spinner baits are legit coming back. And I had a fantastic year last year as well. And this year was no different. I literally caught some really nice fish on, this is the Blackfly Lures. Again, another company. Dean makes these Blackfly Lures in Ontario. This is the Hex series. Sounds a bit spooky. Ooh, the Hex series. But really good bait. This particular color, I forget what it's called. It's called like something lightning, and it's like purple and black. It's got this the hex blades are like kind of like a honeycomb style blade, the pattern punched into it. But we caught a lot of fish, largemouth. We were fishing this super shallow, weedy lake with lots of stumps in it. And we were fishing this with a big twister tail in the back, caught a bunch of big largemouth on that in one day. I don't know if they were just keyed in on that color that day, but probably my favorite overall spinner bait from Blackfly Lures is the Big Bastard. It's kind of like the in-between bass size, pike size, muskie size. So it's small for muskie, it's perfect for pike, and it's big for bass. So it'll catch all three of those things. It's great. It's 3/4 ounce. I always switch the blades around. I have like a very bright colored chartreuse blade on it. It's chartreuse and white. It's got another white blade, a little Colorado up there too. Always put a twister tail on my spinner baits. This for pike always catches this big pike, especially on cloudy days when you just need something bright with a lot of thump. Really good bait. And again, like I said, made in Ontario. But the one spinner bait I tried this year, this was a new one for me. This is not a local company, but it is a bait that's very popular. Grim Reaper Lures. They make all kinds of baits and spinner baits. They're made in the US. Mm-hmm. Look at the size of this willow leaf blade. Yeah. I don't know what size this is, but I saw this at Pro Tackle in Belleville, and it's a musky spinner bait. I think it's like 1.5 to 2 ounce bait. It's not a big bait. This is like a smaller musky spinner bait, but it has a giant willow leaf blade on it. It's the biggest one I've seen on a bait this small. It's like 3 inches long at least. The bait itself, if you don't look at that, it's not a big bait, but I actually caught my first muskie of the year on this. I caught a 38 inch, which isn't a giant, but it was a decent fish. And I was just slow rolling this along a weed line in June. And it was just like thump, 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 thump. And that blade it kicks. Like it's a willow leaf, so it's not like a big Colorado, but this thing is huge. If you're listening to this, just imagine a deck of cards as a blade. It's huge. Like if you were making pancakes on your frying pan, you could use this blade to flip the biggest pancake ever. That's how big it is. It's not that big. I'm lying. But anyway, I love spinner baits. You could eat
some New England clam chowder out of that spinner bait blade.
You could. Like if you were camping and you forgot a spoon, you would take the blade off of the spinner bait and you would use it as a spoon. Mm-hmm. That's how good it is. I was excited to try this, and I did end up catching a good fish on it. Again, it's not a giant bait, but it's one of those size of baits that it's easy enough to chuck all day, and you never know what you're going to catch on this. Bass, walleye, pike, muskie. Great bait. Also a cool bait to troll because it has a lot of lift because of this blade, so it'll stay off the bottom. So that was another bait that I'm excited to try next year. You know, you always buy some baits and you use them maybe like once or twice, and you're like, I want to fish that bait. And then you think of a spot on some lake. You're like, oh, you know that spot on that lake? And you're like, oh, I want to get there. And you just never get there, and your lure just sticks down there. Yeah, it's pretty sad. This is such a sad episode, Andrew. What the heck?
Now, I have a question then. Looking into the new year, Is there
Okay.
any bait that maybe you're looking forward to buying and trying for next year? What's one bait that you are wanting to use next year?
Like new baits?
New bait, or maybe just one that you haven't used before or didn't get a chance to use this year, but you want to. I mean, it's kind of a cop out. You could say the one you just talked about, but that's kind of a cop out.
I'm looking at my big fishing wall behind me.
Well, I'll let you. I threw you on the spot there, but I'll
Okay.
quickly mention one that I'm excited to use next year. This is the Lunker Hunt Frenzy Mouse, and
Ooh.
I had seen it online, and I was like, okay, but I hadn't seen it in any stores. And I was up at, I think it was Bass Pro out in Vaughan, and I had to kill some time as I go walking around, and I saw this. I'm like, this actually looks like a really nice hollow body topwater. And there's some of the things I was watching some videos on it and whatnot, and I like, you know what? I know it's fall. I'm not bass fishing anymore. But I had to buy it at that point in time because I wasn't sure if I'd find it again. These things, they're fully flocked, which is cool because, like Jesse, I know you've got hollow body frogs before where they'll have like a Velcro strip on top, so just that it
Yeah.
helps grip the fish. This apparently does the same because it's flocked. It also will hold water, so it gets heavier as you cast. Out of the box, it's 1/2 ounce, but apparently it'll be closer to 3/4 when you're casting it, just because the outside of it will kind of retain water during the cast. They apparently walk amazing, but the reason why I got it is the hookup ratio on this should be awesome. Because if you look at that collapse, that's got all kinds of space, and these hooks are like extra wide gap with upturned tips, and these things are just wide open. So I'm really excited about this. We had a couple different like mice lures in the past that work
Yeah.
really well, but this one here apparently walks the dog really well. So I'm excited to use this one for next year as kind of like, I'd like this to be my main hollow body topwater. I'd love that. Just because catching stuff on mice, I've caught 3 bass in my life that have had mice in their stomachs. So they're on the food chain.
I would definitely want to try that as well.
And that was a Lunker Hunt Frenzy Mouse.
Frenzy mouse, yeah. Actually, recently I was looking through Lunker Hunt's website because
Mm-hmm.
they make some pretty weird stuff. You ever see like some of the random stuff? Like they'll have like, salamander propeller legged things.
Yep.
And I'm just like, they got some cool stuff. I wouldn't mind trying some of their stuff next year. Because I mean, every once in a while they'll come up with something that I'm just like, that looks sick. Like, I want to try that.
There's a couple of the things that are like, they're odd, but they work really well. I have good success.
Yeah, like the spider.
Yeah. That's
Or
exactly
the
what I was thinking
dragonfly,
about. Yep.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. To answer your question, baits that I want to try. Again, we talked about a whole bunch of lures. So I'm not going to be like, I don't want to use that many lures, but I think we've kind of got down what works for us, generally speaking, for like bass fishing, walleye fishing. I'm always down to try new techniques, but I'm trying to spend less money on fishing lures and just get those techniques down pat. So one lure that I caught 2 fish this year on it, but I want to try a bunch of different sizes of the bait or just learn how to fish it better is the glide baits for muskie. Like this is a hellhound, a squirrely tail. I heard so much about it, about how good glide baits are. And I had one for a while and I just didn't have any confidence in it until I actually tied it on and forced myself to fish it. And that day I actually caught a muskie. So, I mean, I got pretty lucky that day. But then I ended up catching another muskie the next trip we went out. So, I mean, sometimes lures that you hear are effective, you're like, they just don't work for me. Sometimes you just have to force yourself to use them and catch one fish. That's all it takes is one fish to catch on that bait. It doesn't even have to be a giant. And then you get instant confidence in that bait.
Mm-hmm.
And then that effective lure, you can now add to your repertoire and be a more effective angler. So, yeah, I'd like to add one more lure because it's staring at me and it's telling me that I have to talk about it. This lure, remember this?
Yep.
We only fished for salmon a few times this year, and we don't fish the creeks anymore ourselves personally, but we were fishing out in the harbor. We had a great day when we were trolling the moonshine teardrop glow spoon. Like these are ultra glow. Like you light these up with your UV light and it's like the sun. It's like a fragment of the sun. It's so bright. Anyway, when I used to fish a lot down at the harbors, they'd either be really onto the super bright stuff or like turned off by it. This year when we went out, they were totally turned on by it because Andrew was trolling like a little Clio, which glows like medium. And I was trolling this like moonshine that glows like the sun. And 3 fish in a row hit this bait. It was like, boom, fish on, reeled it in. The next fish went on. I hooked it. I gave the rod to Andrew. I'm like, you fight it. Like we're trolling, right? It's just like, whoever catches it, right? And then literally like 10 minutes later, boom, same rod goes off, same lure. The fish just wanted that particular lure. The moonshines, they're absolutely fantastic. They have their time and place for sure. Sometimes we'll slam fish on Cleos. Other times it's the moonshine. So it's always good to have both. But that's a great lure. Mm-hmm. And just to mention all these lures, Jesse, I'm going to talk to you right now as you're editing this later. You're going to go back and link every single one of these lures so that people listening can find them easier. And right now, Jesse is going, why did you say that? That's so much work. But I'm going to do it for you guys because I like you. So everything will be linked down in the description below. You probably own a lot of these lures, but if you don't, check them out. And none of these are affiliate links, but if you do buy something, try to buy it from a local tackle shop. And when you go through and pay, tell them that Jesse and Andrew sent you, and they'll say, who is that?
And then you can spread the name of our podcast to a new listener potentially. We do want to give a big thanks to all of our listeners right now who have, maybe it's your first episode. Thanks for sticking around this long. Don't leave yet. We always have a little special thing at the end of the episode. But if this is your first episode, we really appreciate listening. Hopefully you enjoyed it. We're going to have a few more this year. We're going to have some more next year. And there's a huge back catalog already. We have well over 80 episodes in our back catalog. So feel free. They're all about fishing, all about good tips. If you are a repeat offender and you have been listening to us for a while, thank you very much. Also, why haven't you left us a review? If you have, I apologize for that statement. If you haven't, get on it now. The reason why that helps us a lot. It also helps you because the more opportunities or more times that we get reviewed, especially 5 stars, the more that we get pushed on those kind of websites and stuff like that. So more people can find us. That helps us be able to stay motivated to keep making you guys, hopefully awesome content, but also that we can work with some awesome companies, bait manufacturers and whatnot to continue to get you guys some good giveaways. Thanks again to all of our Patreon members. We do have a couple more giveaways that we're still going to be announcing for this season, and we're going to have some more coming up in the new year. So stay tuned for all of those. But before we end the episode, as tradition states, we're going to have the quote of the week. To handle that, back to Jesse.
So this quote of the week is all about sad things. Andrew's face!